It is right before the beginning of the new league year, but there's still plenty to get to on today's episode of The Audible, including what's going on with Tampa Bay.
Mhm.
Bloom, we entered this offseason thinking, like, all right, they're going to figure something out with Mike Evans. Ding. They're going to figure out something with Baker Mayfield. Maybe not yet, but they also did a lot of work on the quarterbacks at the combine. Everywhere I was,
Mhm.
our dear friend Scott Reynolds from Pewter Report was
Yeah.
there and asking the "Did you talk to Tampa Bay?" question. And you know how many of those young quarterbacks talked to Tampa Bay?
All.
All of them.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, let's start with Evans. And what's interesting here, keep in mind as we get closer to the dawn of free agency, the legal tampering, add that one to the oxymoron list.
Jeez.
Uh 2 years, 52 million for Evans. But right before that, Diana Rossini and others saying, "Oh, he's going to go to free agency." And even Schultz, Justin Schultz way back,
Jordan Schultz.
Jordan Schultz, sorry, thinking
No.
hockey because the Penguins are floundering. Uh, said "Oh, there's a sense they're far apart." Well, 2 years, 52 million, more than a tag. Evans showing last year, as we've documented, chronicled on the show, that he never went away. And you like what the Bucs are doing here, and they're going to they franchise Antoine Winfield, who's an outstanding player, big time IDP, like a safety that matters in IDP fantasy football. And then you move on to Mayfield, and it's not 100%, but it's certainly 90+% that Mayfield's going to be the starter again. And why not? Why not run it back? You went to the playoffs. You won a playoff game. They played Detroit. They didn't get blown off the field against Detroit. So why not bring it back with Evans? And as far as the quarterbacks, I think the other side is you have to be realistic. We look at Geno Smith or Daniel Jones or these mid-level quarterbacks that you're aspiring to make into your long-term starter. Where are these teams ending up looking well for a quarterback? So Baker Mayfield, because that's maybe see if there's a lesson from this whole Baker Mayfield thing. How are we talking about Baker Mayfield at this time last year? What, 1 year, 4 million, right?
Yeah.
There
Mhm.
wasn't really, even though he did kind of come alive for the Rams a little bit, but you see how quickly and easily a quarterback, and I don't think it matters that Baker Mayfield was a number one overall pick. I think if Baker Mayfield was a fourth round pick, he would still be looking at 36 million, 40 million, whatever, after how he played last year and got his team to the playoffs and won a playoff game.
Yeah.
So these things can turn around. Justin Fields pretty quickly.
Yeah, that could easily have been Taylor Heineke, had he played like that or
Mhm.
something. Like, you can rejuvenate things, you can change minds. It's why we like stay so focused on these quarterbacks that do those sorts of things. And correct me if I'm wrong,
Uh-huh.
Bloom. Wasn't there a report out there that Mike Evans like demanded that Baker be back? And if Mike Evans is saying anything, I'm listening.
Yeah, I think there is I don't know about that specific report, but I think there was an I and this is what's one of the fun parts of the offseason is. If you like fantasy football, if you like dynasty fantasy football, you're watching teams really play the game version of franchise management where, okay, here's the challenge, right? It's one of those logic problems with the sheep and the grain and the wolf. Or you get them all across the river: Winfield, Evans, and Mayfield. Let's get all these three guys. And you saw them make some moves, maybe some difficult moves. Jack Barrett, they had to let go, but they're accomplishing that. And frankly, in the NFC South, that's all it takes to continue to win the division.
Yeah, keep it going and keep it up. The AFC North is much different, but let's just talk about both T. Higgins and Michael Pittman here as we'll continue some wide receiver
Sure.
conversation with Higgins and Pittman getting that tag.
Yeah, and what you see represented here, I guess, is I mean, part of the story here is again the tag 250 cap, not tag. The cap 255 million, not 242, 243 like they thought going into the offseason. So teams should be, especially in the case of the Bengals who want to keep this team together. Why not? You're not necessarily going to commit to Higgins. I think you're looking at a scenario more likely, Cease, that Higgins is traded, then Higgins signs a long-term deal with the Bengals, as we talked about, because Jamar Chase, like that's your first priority, and can you really tie up two big contracts at wide receiver? But for now, uh, I would say, Cease, would you say Plan A is just have Higgins play on the tag? I mean, obviously, Plan A is for him to sign a deal that's a team-friendly deal, but he's not going to do that. Or is Plan
Right.
A to trade him because I do think that wide receiver remains the premium position in the NFL, and a team with cap space, like Chicago, I don't know, probably would with a lot of draft capital, maybe would be interested.
Chicago can double up in the top of the draft with their wide receivers, and I think this wide receiver class might lead Higgins towards signing perhaps more of a friendly deal than you thought. Because teams that need a wide receiver, you know what you're going to do? You're going to
Draft
draft
one.
one,
Yeah.
and you know what's going to happen? He's probably going to be pretty damn good.
Yeah, well, then what are we looking at? Like 14, 15 in the top 100, something like
Hmm.
that after I mean,
Yeah, it's
there's one of your
craziness.
stories coming out of the combine. It's just this wide
Yeah,
receiver class is going to make up a large percentage of the top 100, larger than usual. And then turning the page to Pittman, you know, I see when I think of Pittman, I feel like isn't he only 22 or 23? I know that's not true, but what I mean about that is through these iterations of the Colts, I don't think we've seen the player he can fully become, kind of like Darnell Mooney hitting free agency. And hopefully with Anthony Richardson, hopefully we can get him healthy and he can start to really get into this offense in a way that can show off what he can do and what Pittman can do. Because from a fantasy football perspective, it's not that exciting what Pittman did for the very small sample he was on the field with Anthony Richardson. But the idea of this offense is exciting. And the idea of a number one wide receiver in this offense, again, look what DJ Moore did with Justin Fields, who everyone's disparaging as a passer right now. So
right.
you have someone like Pittman, you keep him in your organization. But I think the Colts are another team that could take a wide receiver.
Well, you mentioned rejuvenating your career when talk about Baker the Baby Maker. What did Calvin Ridley do? Because now the reports say he's on track to hit the free agent market and is believed that some teams may be willing to pay him like a number one receiver.
Yeah.
That's according to sources. That's on our newswire at footballguys.com. Looks like my buddy Cameron Wolf had it. So, of course, Cam's on top of things. But Ridley,
Yeah.
doing his thing, coming back for Jacksonville. You thought, hey, Jacksonville, nice job. Keep him around. Well, maybe not.
Yeah. But I'm trying to get our nephew, Matt Harmon, on the show soon. He's on the couch coming back in a couple of weeks. Matt Williamson. We'll talk free agency after all goes down. Um, Matt Harmon has written up Calvin Ridley, reception perception. Get it, folks, if you want to know wide receivers. And his indications are that Calvin Ridley was still pretty good last year, pretty good. And maybe the Jags, like, stop me if you heard this before, like the Jags could be using him in a way that is more suited to his skills than how they did. That there's more there. Uh, and again, with the premium on wide receiver, I'll just also throw out there Mike Williams is another name we could be talking about soon. Mary Kay Cabot putting out there the Browns should trade for Mike Williams. Amari Cooper trade part 2. And certainly you look at the Chargers cap situation and you think you got to get some savings somewhere. Especially, hey, if the Chargers take a wide receiver, then just put this all in motion. The wide receiver market's going to be pretty interesting. And Calvin Ridley, I think you could look at this from one angle, which is Trent Baalke is shrewd, and they're going to re-sign Ridley, but now it's only a third round pick they have to give up instead of a second. Or you could say that's a really dangerous game because with the extra cap room and teams really valuing wide receivers, the bidding could get out of hand quickly, kind of like how they overpaid Christian Kirk and then you lost out on Ridley. So this is going to be an interesting one to watch play out, and one that probably will make the team that signs Ridley look pretty good.
Yeah, you just have to watch the teams with the most money because they can really set the market. Hell, Jacksonville used to do that,
Right.
where you're sitting at the top of the mountain. Who's up there right now? Like the Commanders, right? In terms
Sure.
of cap space. Watch out for those teams and what they need because like those are the teams that can just overpay because they just can. So the
Right.
Commanders right now have 91 million in cap space. Patriots are number 2 with 88
Right.
million, and we
And they
talked
need
about Baker
everything.
earlier, and they need it all. But we
Yeah.
talked about Baker earlier, and while there is a thought that Mac Jones could be rejuvenated somewhere, perhaps even with Sean Payton, keep that in your mental
Mm-hmm.
notes book. There's also a report that Jacoby Brissett, the Patriots are interested in a Jacoby Brissett reunion. Brissett is one of those quarterbacks that I think, like a Baker, in a different
Mm-hmm.
way, Bloom.
Mm-hmm.
But let's say Brissett has a solid season. He's had a solid season before, a full season when Andrew Luck was out. So
Mm-hmm.
like, all right, if Brissett does that, maybe he can turn into some form of, Baker Mayfield
Right.
type of deal, but a reunion in New England, moving on from Mac Jones would be pretty good for that team. And well, it'd be good for that. What's funny is,
Mm-hmm.
and I didn't ask permission to say who I was talking to, but I was talking to a New England reporter and I'm pretty sure he'd be okay if I said his name, but I'll just leave it alone for now. He said that Mac is like doesn't think he's a dirty player. Like Mac, Mac, you're a dirty player, buddy. Anyway, so Jacoby, yeah, maybe back to New England, who, like you said, Bloom need a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, how can you be a dirty player, lacking a conscience? So, of course, in your own mind, you would not see anything wrong with your actions. We'll see what happens with Mac Jones, but we know the Patriots are going to have they're going to pick up at least one quarterback this offseason, at least one.
Yes, yes.
Um,
And with all that money, I mean, they'll do whatever they can.
right. Oh, it could be Kirk Cousins. Who knows?
Uh-huh.
Uh, I think that you're looking at them at the number 3 pick. That's certainly a massive, massive pivot point in the first round. And see the stuff we've been talking about lately. We don't have to rehash the specifics, but okay, Caleb Williams, we can all agree Caleb Williams is going to go number 1, not should, but is, and that 99.8% it's going to be Chicago. Chicago's going to take him number 1.
Yes,
And
yes.
then, well, there are differing opinions on who's going to go number 2. Adam Peters is going to make that decision, and there's probably not going to be a trade down right there. I mean, I bet Adam Peters would be up for trading up to number 1, but I don't think
Mhm.
the window's not open for
Yeah, and with Cliff
business.
Kingsbury, we got the sign the Commanders would be interested, but they're not moving to 1. I don't see that
No,
move. But it's going to be quarterback, quarterback,
and
quarterback. It's just number 3. Who is it
is it
picking?
New
'Cause
England?
I don't think
Right,
it's New England picking
right.
there.
So yeah, I think it makes a lot of sense to think about New England as a team that's a wild card, and what I think that is going. So we can take last year Bryce Young and C.J. Stroud, and I think 2 main lessons we can take away from that. One, environment matters. Again, the thought experiment. How would Bryce Young have looked in Houston? How would C.J. Stroud have looked in Carolina? The organization matters. But the other part of it is that a perception, because the perception mainly had them in roughly the same stratosphere as a prospect. And year 1 reveal, well, it's hard to say what it would be if you control for organization, but boy, it looks like they were not in the same stratosphere as NFL quarterback prospects. And in
Right.
this class, you're going to see very differing opinions about McCarthy, May, and Daniels alone. You're gonna find opinions saying like it's a bad pick, and you're gonna find opinions saying like this is the guy, maybe even more than Caleb Williams for all 3 of them. So the teams are going to be put to the test. And I think what's neat about this year in the quarterbacks is there's no one teams even have multiple choices, right? Like New England could not take a quarterback, could take whoever's there at number 3 out of the perceived 3, could take McCarthy at number 3, could trade down and take McCarthy, could trade down and take Michael Penix, as we've been talking about him now getting back into the mix. It's not a limited range of options, and the teams that do it the right way are going to be rewarded.
Yeah, I still believe New England will move back in the end of the first round for Penix, but move back to 12, still get Penix at 12. Yeah, maybe, depending on what else they get. We'll see what happens there, but and that's the thing, Bloom.
Mhm.
In 18, we knew the 5 that were going to get drafted, and then it was like, okay, 2 of them, maybe 3 now with Baker of the 5 worked out. Sam Darnold, who might be off the Broncos list, if you want to consider that a Lassie Bark, go ahead.
Mm.
And then Josh Rosen, who washed out of the league.
Right.
It's interesting of these five first round quarterbacks. Um, okay, who goes where and how does that impact who works out?
Yeah.
Because I guarantee you, not all 5 are going to work out.
Yeah. Yeah. And we throw Bo Nix in the mix too,
Oh,
and then
he's a first round graded player. I'm not talking about Penix. Personally, for me, McCarthy and Penix are not first round graded
right,
players.
right,
But there will be 5 selected, maybe 6. But I
right.
anticipate Bo Nix will be in the mix for the first round, just as a legitimate first round tools quarterback. Penix has first round tools. He just has, other concerns.
Yeah. And again, which organization they land in. See, we could do this discussion for any of the interesting quarterbacks from 2023, like Jordan Love. Well, how important was it that he had that long to marinate before he was really put out there? Um, you know, Kenny Pickett was going to be underwhelming no matter where he ended up. But the point is, you can run these alternate scenarios, alternate universes. Brock Purdy was one we did recently. So I think that's what's so interesting. And of course, how high they are drafted and how much a team gives up to get the player in the case of a trade also affects this, right? Because I'm going to circle all the way back around to Trey Lance, because now Trey Lance is, Dallas. He has a $4.25 million roster bonus due in training camp, and all indications are already that Dallas is going to pay him that, so they're not going to release him. It's not a trivial amount of money. It
No.
means they haven't given up on him. I mean, I could say that definitively, right? They're not giving up on
Yeah.
him. But also, there's talk again. Rich Eisen, none other than Rich Eisen, putting out there like maybe he could be an option for Minnesota if they don't keep Cousins. So should we close the book? Has any smart football person closed the book on Trey Lance yet?
No.
So
No. The reputation of Trey Lance is probably better in the scouting community than it is in the media or the fan base.
right,
Where he sucks and San Francisco, and all that. Like, no, there's still a lot of evaluators that think highly of him. So, hey, go for it, man. Maybe you just needed a little more time, a little more seasoning, change of scenery, whatever. The physical tools, as Scott McLuhan told me years ago, those are easy to see.
yeah,
It's about fit. It's about the mental side,
right,
clicking and meshing with your head coach, being on the same page. And I'm rooting for Trey Lance, no matter where he goes, Minnesota, what have you. They also say Atlanta now the spot for Kirk. There's still like we got the Russell Wilson thing,
yeah,
and then like, okay, where's Kirk going? Where's Fields
right.
going?
We
Like,
need
there's
one of
still
those
some
ESPN
dominoes
boards where we can like take our hands and like let's put this quarterback here,
moving
this
around,
quarterback
but
here.
then not know how to use the technology, and then it's like, oh, no, no, just
Well, that
put it
would be
over
me.
there,
Yeah,
just in your own mind. So
right,
then
right.
when Diana Rossini reports
Uh,
that the Steelers are not interested in any veteran, I personally don't believe that. It's nothing to do with Diana Rossini and her reporting. I just look at, I mean, the thought of Kenny Pickett and Mason Rudolph and running it back with those two is
I hope not.
exactly
I hope
that.
not. It's Cease. Let me tell you, it's a Pittsburgh sports fan right now. At least it looks like the Penguins are finally not in denial about needing to be a seller at the trade deadline, which is an admission that, this era is kind of really coming to an end. At least they're admitting that. The Steelers never did that. The Steelers never admitted to themselves at the end of the Ben Roethlisberger era, we need to rethink this,
Right.
how we win,
Right.
how we go out and win football games. And as a Steelers fan, if you want me to go on a rare Bloom rant, because it's so frustrating. The reason that when I hear that report, I believe it is emotional, because I feel like the team has no imagination, no boldness. They're not willing to admit they made mistakes. How long did it take to admit Jarvis Jones was a mistake? Well, I mean, did they take Bud Dupree? But that was a mistake too. Their thinking is not. They're not critically self-scouting, not just what's wrong with the team, but how their thinking led them to that place and how they might need to change that thinking, and then they just lurch over to the other side. But Justin Fields for a third round pick or a fourth round pick, is his market's deflated? That's a slam dunk. That's a
Easy.
slam dunk. I don't care. Look, Trey Lance already just sitting on the Cowboys bench as a third string quarterback probably saw his value increase. And
Mhm.
Justin Fields, you're not actually exaggerating when you say he was in one of the worst environments for quarterback development in the NFL for the last 3 years. One of the worst. We talk about environments and effect on a quarterback. I don't know there was a quarterback that could really transcend what he was dropped into in
Mhm.
Chicago.
Yeah.
Okay? So that's a slam dunk. Russell Wilson. Okay, Russell Wilson is going to get paid $39 million this year no matter what.
Mhm.
If he signs for $20 million, he's getting paid $39 million. He signs for $1 million, he's getting paid $39 million, right?
Mhm.
So he's going to pick his team. If you're Russell Wilson, the Steelers look like a really good place to rehabilitate your image. If you're the
Yes.
Steelers, you cannot possibly hurt the team by signing Russell Wilson. We already benched Kenny Pickett. If you're like, well, what about Kenny Pickett's feelings? You already benched him for Mason freaking Rudolph. So, like, who cares about? I mean, you've already shown what you feel about his feelings. So if you're not willing to make either one, and I get it, the Steelers don't make a splash at quarterback. It's painful. Even Ben Roethlisberger fell into their laps. They don't make a splash at quarterback. As an organization, they just, for whatever reason, they will not be bold at the most important, except when like bold is taking Kenny Pickett instead of Trey McDuffie or, oh God. So they have to make a move at quarterback. They have to make a move. They, especially in this market where other teams are going to be rushing for Kirk Cousins or looking like mesmerized by the draft prospects. This is when you can make your move for a Wilson or Fields or both. Heck, why not? Just open it up. May the best man. That's how Russell Wilson. The myth of Russell Wilson begins with "May the best man win." Right.
Mm-hmm.
So these are all the reasons the Steelers will not do this, because it's miserable to be a Pittsburgh sports fan right now.
Okay, there you go. Crosby going to go to the Abs?
No. Well, Avs are. I don't think they're going to be buyers at the deadline. I mean, they're not in on Jake Kensel. It's Vancouver.
All right. I'm glad you're telling me these things because I have no idea.
Vancouver was the last Canadian team to like really. They had Game 7 in Vancouver because they haven't brought the Cup back to Canada. I don't even know how long now. It was in the 90s, like Montreal did it in the 90s, and they actually had like low key Canadian riots when they lost Game 7 in Vancouver. That's how you make Canadians riot. Is almost winning the Cup and not winning it.
Okay, there you go. The more you know.
Yeah.
Do. Thank you for the mini rant, Bloom. Wow.
I'm frustrated. I'm frustrated. See, I'm frustrated because it's so easy. It's so easy.
Justin Fields for a third should be not even think about it.
It's a layup. And the sad thing is, as a Steelers fan, see, you aroused it again. As a Steelers fan watching them, as a Steelers fan watching them for the last 5 years, how easy is it to say if they just had even last year's Russell Wilson or last year's Justin Fields, like not even asking them to improve. If they had either of those quarterbacks in any of these years, like how many playoff games could they have won? Just a quarterback who like could do something, just like poking with a stick, do something. Like just a quarterback who like twitches when you poke him with a stick. If they just had that, what could this team have done?
Yeah. Super Bowl 43 was what? 15 years ago? Like whatever the number is now.
It's licks now.
Yeah. So Super Bowl 43, 15 years. We've been doing this show 19 years.
Yeah.
So at least we got did we get 40 and 43 on this show? We might have, right?
I think that 40 was our show. This show started right on the heels of 40. Like we started we were basking in the glow of 40.
The Super Bowl that they bought. Yeah, because Paul Allen could buy the Rooney family over and over and over again. Anyway, Seattle fans, you're fine. Everybody's fine. Russell Wilson is fine. Yeah, that's a good way to wrap up the show, Bloom.
Yeah, it's off season.
Yeah, there you go. We will keep you abreast of the situations that are going on across the National Football League. Do those YouTube things. Help us out. Grow our YouTube channel. Like, comment, share, subscribe, hit the notification bell so that you never miss a vid. We appreciate you for doing that. And check out footballguys.com. We'll have our newsletter flowing again from the draft all the way through the Super Bowl. Takes written by me, Sigmund Bloom, Joe Bryant, and there's a new guy, and his name is Bob Harris. Very happy to announce that.
You got to lead with Bob from now on. Now it's Bob Harris.
It's Bob Harris and the rest of us. Yeah. Okay, so that's how we do it at Football Guys. We appreciate you all for checking us out. He's Sig. I'm Cecil. We are The Audible. Thanks for watching. Stay tuned and stay frosty.